On the 9th year of the 1st century AD, 3 Roman legions were slaughtered by Germanic barbarians. On what would be known to history as the Massacre of the Teutoburg Forest, the troops were lured by a barbarian-born Roman man named Arminius, and his betrayal made the legions fall into a trap and to their doom. The massacre cemented the difference between the Roman civilized world and the Germanic barbarian world. Afterwards, the Romans decided that Germania, nowadays Germany, would never be part of the civilized world, as they deemed the Germanic barbarians too treacherous and without honor to take part in any civilization. But this did not stop the Romans to be thirsty for revenge, and one man named Germanicus was decided to do it. Join us while we uncover the story of the revenge of the Teutoburg massacre. In this video, we are going to tell the story of one of the most important acts of revenge in Roman history, something that would set the stage for the centuries to come in Europe, and still have an impact on the world nowadays. But before we start, I would like to ask to click on the subscribe button. It's free, and by clicking on it, you have done your duty. The people of the past would feel proud that we care about their history and our history. Okay, but back to the video. After the defeat in the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, where 3 entire Roman legions were massacred on one of the worst disasters in Roman history, the Emperor Augustus ordered the Romans to totally abandon the province of Magna Germania and the construction of fortifications along the Rhine River, and drew a line extending along the Rhine and Danube rivers as the northern boundary of the empire. But in 14 AD, Tiberius became the new emperor, and now there was an opportunity for the Romans to have their revenge. Shortly after the death of the Emperor Augustus, a mutiny broke out with the legions that were stationed near the Danube River. Unhappy with the fact that they were rewarded with swampy and mountainous land for their time in service as soldiers, they attempted to kill their commander. This situation was only resolved when Drusus, son of the Emperor Tiberius, arrived with 2 Praetorian cohorts. They controlled the situation, and he addressed the demands of the troops and executed the leaders of the mutiny. But when the news of the mutiny reached the Roman legions in the other regions of Germania, they also revolted by attacking and killing their leaders. At the time, the general Germanicus was in Gaul, moved his troops there quickly to suppress the rebellion. Aware of the danger that the Germanic tribes could pose to the Roman frontier after the massacre of the Teutoburg Forest, to keep the soldiers protecting the border, Germanicus agreed to the demands and doubled their pay, but also executed the leaders of the mutiny. Germanicus, a nephew and adopted son of the Emperor Tiberius, decided after the revolts to send a message to the barbarian tribes and carry out a devastating and insulting raid deep into Cheruscan territory. The Cheruscans were a barbarian tribe. They used to live on the east bank of the Rhine River, and they became well known by being the main people responsible for the defeat of the Roman legions in the Teutoburg Forest. Their leader was Arminius, a barbarian raised by Romans who betrayed his Roman stepfather, Varus. The objective of Germanicus' raid was to rescue Segestes, Arminius' sworn enemy. Segestes, who was the father of Arminius' wife, was under house arrest and in danger of being executed by the Cheruscans. His crimes were to try to break a peaceful resolution on the ongoing conflict between the Cheruscans and the Romans. After the successful raid, Germanicus rescued Segestes and a large number of people from his family, and among them also his daughter, Tusnelda, wife of Arminius. She was pregnant when the Germanicus soldiers rescued her with her father. She did not feel like she was being rescued, but more like she was being taken against her will. And the raid and the rescue operation happened just under the nose of Arminius, almost at the heart of the Cheruscan land. Germanicus assured Segestes that he and his family would be given refuge in Gaul and they would be treated very well. Germanicus also gave full credit for planning the raid to the Emperor Tiberius, even although people knew that he was responsible for the success of the mission. By giving credit to the emperor, he assured his good favor to him and also appeased any animosity they could have between them. After the massacre of the Teutoburg Forest, Arminius wasted no time. He was organizing another treacherous attack to the Roman Empire. He he incited rage against the Romans on the Cherusci people, as well as a number of surrounding tribes on his side. But his main goal was to secure the allegiance of his paternal uncle, Inguiomerus, a long-respected ally of the Romans. Germanicus needed to act fast and create a diversion to weaken the enemy. He sent 4 legions to the Ems River, at the east of the Rhine River, and the cavalry cohorts were detached and sent to the region of Frisia, bordering the North Sea. Germanicus then took his remaining 4 legions in a hastily constructed fleet across a lake that was drained by the Ems River. The cohort, cavalry, and marine troops reunited at the river, where they were joined by a barbarian allied force. Germanicus then sent a number of cohorts to fight the Bructeri, a minor barbarian tribe, which according to their information have taken the eagle standard of one of the legions lost in the Teutoburg Forest. The Germanic tribes, when they saw the cohorts, start to burn their personal possessions, a barbarian practice that symbolized that they have nothing to lose. But besides the show, they were no match for the Roman army and were defeated easily. The soldiers then recovered the lost eagle standard of the 19th legion. The Roman army marched through the barbaric wasteland, and between the Ems and Lippe rivers, there they finally reached the killing ground of the Teutoburg Forest. The scene of the battlefield with their murdered comrades was a big reminder of why they were in these wild lands. Most of the men had friends or relatives among the fallen soldiers, and among the troops was the brother of Arminius, FLAVIUS. He had joined the troops of Germanicus to avenge his adopted father, Varus, murdered during the massacre led by his own brother, Arminius. FLAVIUS also had born among the Cherusci and was adopted by Varus as an infant. On the site of the massacre, the Romans start to bury the remains of the Romans murdered there and pay their final respects. The deathbed of the soldiers of Varus was exposed to everyone to see, a vision which defines the word barbarism. Whitened bones of men and horses covered the ground. Among the hundreds of military equipment lying to the ground, some were growing to the trees, bearing human skulls nailed to the trunks. They were bloody tokens of sacrifice to the Germanic gods as a glaring reminder of Germanic barbarism. Nearby were places of other tribes containing macabre altars where the senior officers had been sacrificed. There were also pits where the Roman prisoners had been tortured, and gallows from which they had been hanged. Germanicus hoped that the military operation to avenge the legions would turn into political gain for him in the eyes of the Roman people, just as happened with Julius Caesar in the Gallic Wars and Caesar Augustus in the civil war against Mark Antony. But the brutality and the sheer barbarism of what he found there changed his mind and the mind of the Romans. You see, what they wanted was to extend the empire rather peacefully wherever is possible, and they had genuine desire that the barbarians would become civilized and soon would enter the empire and become Romans themselves. However, the Germanic barbarians were a different kind of barbarians, different from the Gallic or any other kind of barbarians they had encountered before. Apparently, the Arminius betrayal made them think that treachery runs on their blood. Germanicus understood, upon seeing that macabre scene on the forest, that the Germanic people would never be civilized, and to the very end the Romans would call the Germanic people as barbarians. Germanicus ordered the troops to prepare a funeral for the remains of the Romans in the forest. The soldiers constructed mass graves for their fallen friends and family members, even Germanicus himself actively participating in the burial, and his last tribute to the ones fallen at the Teutoburg Forest had a dramatic effect on the troops' morale. The men were filled with anger and sorrow at the scene of the crime committed against their friends and relatives. Germanicus then ordered the Romans to search for any follower of Arminius, and soon the search paid off as they discovered Arminius' camp, and it was just across the Weser River, and he ordered his troops to march there. But Arminius was informed that his brother was among the Romans near the camp and asked for his brother. Flavius, once heard about it, answered nothing, and started to prepare his weapons and mount his horse to cross the river to fight his brother. But the Roman general Stertinius stopped him. Arminius started to shout from the other side, trying to convince his brother to join him. They both started shouting across the river, both convinced that their side was the correct one, and as a result, both brothers stayed on opposite sides. The camp was situated on open ground, an ideal fighting ground for the Romans. The Romans thought that Arminius had made a grave mistake, but the camp on open ground was a trap. Close to the camp there was a forest, and Arminius knew about the Romans searching for his camp and had time to prepare. Germanicus sent his cavalry to attack the camp, but Arminius immediately turned his men to face the Roman attack, and called additional troops he had hiding in the forest to attack. The cavalry was thrown into confusion by the unexpected attack, and the Roman cavalry started to fall back. But at the same time, a reserve cohorts went to stifle the line, but were disorganized by their comrades' retreats. The barbarians started to force the Romans into the marshy ground. It was a death trap for the cavalry. It started to look like another massacre would happen. But at the same time, in perfect coordination, Germanicus brought the regular legions in battle formation. The soldiers were more motivated than ever, and that initial setback wouldn't take their revenge from them. They were ready to slay the barbarians. For the barbarians looked like a frightening panorama of an unstoppable Roman war machine. The barbarians withdrew, leaving the camp to the Romans, with nothing of value to take it from there. Arminius, however, had escaped with his entire force intact. Afterwards, Germanicus decided to return the Ems river and ordered his 4 legions to return to the Rhine. On the way back, the commander Aulus Caecina, which was in command of the 4 legions, was again attacked by Arminius and his people in the dense forest. But this time the Romans were ready and managed to defend themselves and retreat to more solid ground. In the meantime, the barbarian commander had his own problems. He couldn't simply order his chiefs and men to do as he wished. Instead, he had to persuade them. His plan, consistent with his Roman military training, was to wait for the Roman army to start their march, as they would be without supplies and the time to survive the Germanic siege. This would allow the Germans to use their forces to force the legions into the swamp where they would be destroyed. And on his mind, it would be the Teutoburg Forest all over again. But Arminius' uncle, who was well respected among the tribes and the Romans, had a different view on the matter. He believed that the best way was to proceed traditionally, by surrounding the enemy camp and attacking them simultaneously. Using this tactic, the barbarians would take more loot and get more prisoners that could be turned into slaves. And this is what the barbarian chiefs wanted more. So the decision they took was to go with the second plan and attack the camp. They started by killing some Roman soldiers that were in guard outside. And seeing some of the Roman soldiers run in fear and desperation, the barbarians were encouraged to carry on the attack. And screaming loud war cries, they poured down into the camp. But when many of the barbarians were deep into the camp, the signal was given to the Roman cohorts to attack. The barbarians at that point had become overconfident and fearless by listening to the false propaganda spread by their leaders that the Romans now were weak and defenseless. They were expecting to meet a lazy horde of frightened, defeated and poorly armed men. But this was a mirage that the Romans want them to see. The real Roman troops were hidden. The harsh reality is that they have fallen on their knees exactly where the Romans want them to be. For the barbarians, the terrifying sight of the Roman war machine bearing down on them from behind should have been frightening. Now the attackers were the attacked. The enormous Roman army went down to the camp, crushing the barbarians in what would become another massacre. The difference is that this time the barbarians were on the losing side. The barbarians expected an easy victory, but instead they fell into a trap, just like the Romans had done 6 years ago. The barbarians were nearly wiped out from the face of earth. The Romans had there a chance like no other of extinguish the worst kind of barbarians they ever faced, the Germanic Barbarians. And as they did with the Gaulish people, Latinize and civilize them. But destiny this time wanted that chaos would prevail over order, and the barbarians would remain barbarians to attack the empire another day. However, Arminius, who knew Roman tactics, had an idea of what would happen after the other barbarian leaders rejected his plan. He managed to escape the massacre without a scratch, probably because he took the traitor's way and fled the scene while he could. But his uncle got badly wounded in the battle. The slaughter of the barbarians went on for the rest of the day. Some of them managed to escape from the Roman camp, only to die in the swamp nearby. The Romans had avenged the 3 legions that were lost in the Teutoburg Forest. But besides their victory, they waited for the night to return to their camp in order to avoid any other barbarian counterattack. What they didn't realize is that there was no more barbarians, their victory was complete. When they arrived back to their camp, they had no food, no supplies, little equipment, and many were seriously wounded. But, as the historian Tacitus later wrote in his works, they have their cure, nourishment, restoration, everything in one. They have a victory. After 2 years of fighting Germania, in 70 AD, Germanicus was back in Rome for a triumph for his victories. In the procession, he had, among others, the wife of Arminius, Tusnelda, and their son. The life of Tusnelda, after being displayed in public in the triumph, is not known, but it's believed that her son survived in Rome and died with the age of 15 or 16 years old. Arminius, a few years after the defeat, was deposed by his barbarian tribe and executed, in a suitable death for a traitor. The fate of Flavius, the brother of Arminius, is not known. However, he seems to have died before 47 AD, because the remaining of the dying tribe of the Cherusci sent envoys to Rome to appeal to the son of Flavius, Italicus, to lead them. 2 years after the triumph, the general Germanicus got mysteriously ill and died. The Roman people blamed the Emperor Tiberius of ordering to poison Germanicus because of his popularity, fearing that he would want to become emperor himself. Tiberius wanted that his son succeed him, but Germanicus' popularity was so huge that in the end the son of Germanicus, Caligula, became the emperor after Tiberius. Despite the victories, Tiberius decided not to annex the territory conquered on Magna Germania, judging that the cost of maintaining it and the conditions which the Romans would live there were simply not good enough, as the place was full of numerous swamps and forests. Or maybe he chose to do this to try to diminish Germanicus' popularity and ensure his biological son would be his successor. But later he was coerced to adopt Germanicus' son Caligula anyway, and there is stories that Tiberius tortured him mentally in the island of Capri to make him crazy. The northern border of the empire is marked on the wide waters of the Rhine. Arminius in the end got what he wanted. Germania would always be seen as barbarian lands, while the Romans got Caligula. If you like to hear news and history about the ancient Romans, don't forget to give a like to this video. And to be notified when we have a new video, don't forget to hit the bell icon. There is always something new to discover. And if you want to know more about the Roman Empire, click on the video appearing on the screen. Thank you for watching. Tibi grátis pro Vigilabo.